Picture this. You're 35,000 feet above the ground, hurtling through the atmosphere at nearly 600 miles per hour, sipping a lukewarm coffee like it's completely normal. And outside your tiny oval window, nothing but darkness above and a carpet of clouds below. It almost feels like the plane could just keep going, keep climbing, break free of the atmosphere entirely, and drift up toward the edge of space. But it doesn't. It just sits there, locked into that same band of sky, flight after flight, year after year. And here's what nobody tells you. The airplane isn't choosing to stay there because it's comfortable. It's staying there because if it climbs any higher, several things begin to go catastrophically wrong at the exact same time. Not one thing, not two things, everything simultaneously. That's what we're unpacking today. And trust me, by the time we're done, you'll never look out an airplane window the same way again. Section 1. Why going higher seems like a great idea. Let's start with the obvious question. Why would anyone even want to fly higher in the first place? The answer is fuel. Airlines are obsessed with fuel efficiency the way a marathon runner is obsessed with weight. Every extra pound of fuel burned is money evaporating into the atmosphere. And altitude is one of the most powerful tools available to fight that burn rate. Here's the physics. As you climb higher into the atmosphere, air molecules spread further apart. The air becomes less dense, and when air is less dense, it pushes back against a moving object with less force. That resistance, called aerodynamic drag, is the invisible hand constantly slowing an aircraft down. The engines are always fighting it. So, climb higher, reduce the drag, and suddenly the engines don't have to work nearly as hard to maintain the same speed. The plane travels further on the same tank of fuel. Over a 10-hour transatlantic flight, that efficiency difference translates into thousands of dollars saved per trip, per aircraft. Multiply that across hundreds of daily flights, and you start to understand why airlines genuinely care about squeezing every possible foot of altitude out of their aircraft. In fact, modern commercial jets are so finely tuned to their cruise altitude that flying them even a few thousand feet lower than optimal can measurably increase fuel consumption. Altitude isn't just a preference. It's engineered into the economics of every flight. So logically, if higher is better, why stop at 40,000 feet? Why not 50,000? Why not 60,000? Because above a certain point, the atmosphere stops cooperating entirely. Section 2. The engine problem. When the sky stops breathing, a jet engine is essentially a very sophisticated air processing machine. It sucks air in through the front, compresses it under enormous pressure, blasts fuel into it, ignites the mixture, and fires the exhaust backward with tremendous force. That force pushes the plane forward. The critical ingredient in all of that? Oxygen. Without sufficient oxygen, the fuel won't ignite properly. The combustion becomes unstable, inefficient, and eventually fails altogether. Modern turbofan engines are extraordinary pieces of engineering, but they are completely dependent on a steady supply of breathable air. At 35,000 feet, the air is already remarkably thin, roughly a quarter of the density you'd experience standing at sea level. The engines are designed and calibrated to work within this range. But push the aircraft to 50,000 feet, and the oxygen available drops to a level where even the most powerful engines begin to struggle. They can't compress enough air to maintain stable combustion. Thrust decreases. And when thrust decreases at altitude, you have almost no backup plan. There's no pulling over, there's no coasting downhill. If the engines lose meaningful power at extreme altitude, you are in a desperate situation with very little room to recover. The aircraft needs to descend, but descending quickly from 50,000 feet in a controlled, safe manner requires precise energy management that becomes extremely difficult when your engines are already compromised. This is one wall, but it's not the only one. Section 3. The wing problem. Lift on the edge of collapse, wings are arguably the most elegant engineering achievement in human history. A carefully curved surface moving through air generates a pressure difference, higher pressure below, lower pressure above. And that difference creates an upward force we call lift. It's the reason 900,000 pound aircraft can leave the ground at all. But lift depends on air. Specifically, it depends on air flowing over and under the wing at sufficient speed and density to create that pressure difference. And at extreme altitudes, the air becomes so thin that generating enough lift requires the aircraft to fly faster. Significantly faster? This is where things get genuinely dangerous. Sound travels through air at roughly 767 miles per hour at sea level. But at altitude, where temperatures plummet to minus 60 degrees Celsius or lower, the speed of sound drops. And as an aircraft accelerates toward the speed of sound, something unexpected starts happening to the airflow around its wings. Pockets of air moving over the curved upper surface of the wing can actually reach sonic speed before the rest of the aircraft does. Why and other airflows begin forming. The airflow becomes chaotic and unpredictable. Control surfaces, the ailerons, elevators, and rudder that the pilots use to steer start responding erratically. The aircraft shakes. Stress concentrates in the metal at points it was never meant to handle. Engineers call this phenomenon compressibility, and it is not a slow, gradual problem. Once it begins, it escalates rapidly. Commercial aircraft aren't built to handle sustained flight at those speeds. Their airframes, their control systems, their entire structural philosophy assumes they will stay well below the speed of sound. The moment they approach it, things start breaking down, literally and figuratively. Section 4. The Coffin Corner, the most dangerous place in the sky. Now here's where all of these problems converge into something truly chilling. At high altitude, every aircraft has two critical speed limits. The first is the minimum speed required to maintain lift. Fly any slower than this, and the wings simply stop working. The aircraft stalls and begins to fall, essentially becoming a very expensive glider with no glide path. This lower limit is called the stall speed. The second limit is the maximum speed the aircraft can safely handle before compressibility effects and structural stress become dangerous. This upper limit is called the maximum operating speed. At low altitudes, say 10,000 feet, these two limits are far apart. A pilot has enormous flexibility in how fast or slow to fly. There's a huge safe operating zone between stalling and going too fast. But here's what happens as you climb. The stall speed increases because thinner air requires faster movement to generate the same lift. And the maximum operating speed decreases because the speed of sound drops at colder temperatures, bringing the danger zone closer. These two limits move toward each other like the jaws of a trap. By the time you reach 40,000 feet on a typical commercial jet, the gap between these two speeds has shrunk considerably. The aircraft must be flown with real precision. There is still a safe margin, but it demands constant attention. Push to 45,000 or 50,000 feet, and that gap can shrink to almost nothing. Sometimes literally just a handful of knots separate flying safely from either stalling or tearing the aircraft apart. Pilots call this nightmarish narrowing zone the Coffin Corner. And the name exists for a reason. Flying in the Coffin Corner means there is virtually no correct response to unexpected turbulence. A sudden gust, a slight miscalculation. The margins are so razor thin that even a minor deviation can push the aircraft over one edge or the other. It is, in the most literal sense, a place from which there may be no recovery. This is not a theoretical risk. Several aviation incidents throughout history have involved aircraft accidentally climbing into conditions approaching the Coffin Corner, with near catastrophic results. Section 5. The pressurization problem. The cabin is a pressure vessel. There's one more layer to this story that most passengers never think about. The cabin you're sitting in right now, if you're on a plane, is essentially a pressurized metal tube. Outside at 36,000 feet, the air pressure is so low that a human being would lose consciousness within seconds and die within minutes without supplemental oxygen. Your body is simply not built for that environment. So the aircraft continuously pumps compressed air into the cabin, maintaining an internal pressure roughly equivalent to sitting at 7,000 or 8,000 feet. Uncomfortable for some, but survivable for everyone. That pressurization creates a constant battle between the inside and outside of the fuselage. The cabin walls are being pushed outward by higher internal pressure. Every window, every door seal, every rivet is under continuous stress during the entire flight. Aircraft are specifically engineered to handle this, tested to extremes before they ever carry a single passenger. But there are limits. The higher the aircraft climbs, the greater the pressure differential between inside and outside. The structural stresses multiply, and aircraft frames are not infinitely strong. They are optimized for a specific operational envelope. Push beyond it and the risk of structural fatigue, seal failure, or catastrophic decompression increases significantly. History has provided brutal reminders of what happens when pressurization systems fail or fuselage integrity is compromised at altitude. It is not a slow, graceful failure. It is sudden, violent, and irreversible. Section 6. The sweet spot, why 35,000 to 40,000 feet, is perfect. So when you add it all up, the engine oxygen requirements, the wing lift equations, the Coffin Corner speed trap, and the pressurization structural limits, something remarkable emerges. There is a band of atmosphere, roughly between 35,000 and 40,000 feet, where all of these competing forces reach a kind of equilibrium. The air is thin enough to dramatically reduce drag and improve fuel efficiency, but it's thick enough for jet engines to breathe comfortably and generate full thrust. It provides enough density for wings to generate stable lift at speeds well within safe limits. The Coffin Corner remains at a safe distance, and the pressure differential is manageable without pushing the fuselage toward its structural boundaries. This isn't a compromise in the negative sense. It's a precise, engineered solution, decades of aviation research, accident investigation, aerodynamic testing, and material science converging on a single answer. The 35,000 to 40,000 foot cruise band is where commercial aviation works best. Not because engineers got lazy, but because the atmosphere itself dictated the terms. Every flight you have ever taken has operated within this invisible corridor. Every routing decision, every climb profile, every fuel calculation is built around it. The sky looks infinite from your window seat, but it isn't. It's a precisely layered environment with invisible rules, physical boundaries, and consequences that aviation engineers have spent a century learning to respect. Your airplane isn't conquering the sky. It's negotiating with it, finding the one narrow layer where everything works, and staying there with extraordinary precision for hours at a time. And here's a thought to leave you with. If atmospheric physics already creates this kind of invisible ceiling for conventional jets, what does that mean for the future of high-speed travel? Supersonic passenger jets, aircraft that cruise at twice the speed of sound, face an entirely different set of atmospheric physics at higher altitudes. The engineering required to solve those problems is some of the most complex work happening in aviation right now. And the answers are going to change how we think about long-distance travel. Forever. Want to know how? Watch the next video. Because what engineers are building to break through these limits, and what they discovered in the process, is genuinely one of the most fascinating stories in modern aviation. Don't miss it.